A researcher decided to do something very few people would ever dare to do. He spent months interviewing more than 400 prostitutes. Not driven by curiosity, not driven by scandal, he was driven by a silent obsession to discover what makes a man lose value in a woman's eyes. And what he found was far more disturbing than he imagined. Most men believe a woman loses desire because of one single mistake, a bad message, a date that went wrong, a poorly chosen sentence. But no, what this researcher discovered is that loss of value doesn't happen with noise, it happens in silence. It's gradual, almost invisible, until one day she simply sees you with different eyes, and you have no idea why. Here's the brutal part. It doesn't matter how much emotional energy you invest. It doesn't matter how hard you try to please her. It doesn't matter how present you are. If you send the wrong signals, desire shuts off. Not slowly, instantly. And the most painful part? Not even she can explain it. Her unconscious reacts before her mind understands. Carl Jung would have understood this immediately because for him, the persona, the mask we wear, is never as powerful as the shadow, the truth we hide. And when a man acts from a place of neurosis, from a lack of integration, he has already started losing. This video is not for the man who wants to please. It is for the man who wants to understand. Because female desire, like the collective unconscious, is not fair, is not logical, is archetypal. And anyone who does not understand the invisible symbols is destined to be discarded without explanation. Today, I am not going to tell you how to make a woman like you. I'm going to show you which behaviors destroy your psychic presence, even when you believe you are doing everything right. Because the enemy is not your body, not your money. The enemy is what your unconscious communicates without you realizing it. And if you are willing to see the truth without anesthesia, by the end of this video, you will understand something almost nobody knows: how to never lose your center. And in this world, that is worth more than any approval. Most men lose value not when they are rejected, but long before. They lose it in invisible gestures, in poorly handled silence, in micro-actions that expose a fragmented self. They lose it when they stop being an archetype and become an emotional dependent. One of the most common mistakes is early emotional overexposure. Showing too much interest too fast is read by a woman's deep instinct as a lack of individuation. Female desire at a primal level does not respond to a man who is incomplete. It responds to wholeness, to mystery, to a man who has his own world. Another silent mistake: being too available, replying instantly, canceling plans just to see her, restructuring your life around her schedule. All of that sends a subconscious message: I have no center. And even though it sounds romantic, it actually lowers your perceived value because it projects a lack of purpose. And the worst mistake of all, constantly seeking validation, asking if she likes you, fishing for reassurance, fearing the loss of her attention. That anxious energy does not go unnoticed. It is felt. And it doesn't matter what you say. If your energy says, I need you to complete me, desire collapses.
This is where Jung enters. He understood that the self is not built on external validation. It is built on internal integration. And when a man operates from insecurity, every word he speaks, no matter how logical, loses weight. Because value is not communicated through arguments. It is communicated through presence, through the integration of the shadow, through the projection of the animus. Loss of value does not always show up as direct rejection. Sometimes she simply starts ignoring you. She laughs less. She takes longer to reply. Small shifts you don't know how to interpret, but they destabilize your psyche. And then you make another fatal mistake. You try to compensate. More messages, more effort, more attention. But that effort only proves one thing. You are desperate to soothe an anxiety that is yours alone to fix, and she doesn't need to say it. She never will. Her intuition, her tone, her attitude, they are screaming it. Here is the key point. Female desire is not democratic. You cannot negotiate to keep it. You cannot argue your way into it. You can only understand what activates it and what kills it. What activates it is simple: an integrated self, centered energy, emotional independence. What kills it? Neuroses, anxiety, projection, lack of inner structure. This is not about pretending to be a bad boy. It is about possessing real internal solidity. Because when you lose your center, you lose the interaction. And the problem is, most men don't even realize they've lost it. They operate from a mother complex without calling it that. They act like the puer aeternus, the eternal child, without admitting it. And step by step, they lose value in the eyes of a woman who is biologically wired to feel the difference between a boy and a man without thinking. Has it ever happened to you? A woman seems interested at first, and then suddenly she goes cold. No obvious reason. It wasn't random. At some point, your unconscious sent signals that lowered your value, and you didn't know how to read them. That's the power of the unconscious projection. A tone of voice, an avoiding glance, an insecure laugh, slouched posture. All of that communicates more than 1,000 words, and her intuition picks it up instantly. The man who constantly adapts, who reshapes his persona based on her reactions, stops being a source of desire and becomes a functional figure, a nice guy, a figure who inspires comfort but not libido. And the most cruel part, she may actually appreciate you but not desire you. She can talk to you for hours, trust you with secrets, thank you for your attention, and at the same time never imagine you in her bed. Not because there's no connection, but because there's no polarity. Jung would tell you, he who would rather be good than whole will end up being ignored. This is not about being evil. It is about projecting an energy that commands the respect due to a complete human being, and from that, desire is born, because respect for the self always comes before desire for the other.
In this section, we've only scratched the surface, but if you're starting to grasp this, you're already ahead of 90% of men. What kills desire is not your essence, it is your fragmentation, not your personality, but your need for the mother in her to validate you. And most important of all, it is not she who decides that you lose value. It is your silent behavior that hands it over. For several months, a social psychologist conducted one of the most uncomfortable and revealing studies ever recorded. He interviewed and observed the dynamics of more than 400 prostitutes, not out of morbid curiosity, not to judge their profession, but to understand how female desire shifts based on the psychic energy of the men who visit them. Because even in a transactional sexual environment, desire, attraction, and archetypal perception still operate. And what he discovered was shocking. The women charged the same, they offered the same service, but they did not respond the same way to every man. Sometimes they felt more attracted, more engaged, more connected. Why? If the service was identical, what made certain men desirable even in a paid environment? The answer is brutal. The invisible language of the psyche. Those men were not necessarily more handsome, not taller, not richer, but they projected something different. Centered energy, contained masculinity, a calm confidence that did not need explanation. Prostitutes, women trained to interact with hundreds of men without emotional involvement, reported feeling more attracted, more open, and even more respectful toward men who did not come seeking validation, but came projecting wholeness. In some cases, they even admitted feeling nervous around certain men, not from fear, but from the intensity of their presence. And the most fascinating part, these reactions were not rational, they were visceral, rising from the collective unconscious. When the recorded sessions were analyzed, a clear pattern emerged. Men did not lose value because of what they said, but because of what they communicated without speaking. Nervous movements, collapsed posture, people-pleasing behavior, insecure jokes, All of it created a low-value perception, even while paying. One detail froze the researchers. Some workers admitted that although they pretended interest with everyone, they only genuinely felt it with certain men. And those men were not always the most attractive, not the richest, not the most talkative. They were the most integrated. So what did these standout men have in common? They did not seek approval. They did not display anxiety. They maintained eye contact without trying to force intimacy. They moved slowly, calmly, not rushed. They behaved as if their existence alone was already enough. And this is where Jung enters. He would have said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. These men were not begging, they were positioned. Their value was not sold, it was felt. They did not explain who they were. They did not try to convince. They were the archetype. And the most interesting part? Many of them didn't even know it. They were not performing. They were simply that way. They had developed a strong internal structure, a core that did not need external projection to exist, and that even in the most artificial environment of desire, still triggered the same biological responses. Because a woman's psyche never fully disconnects, not even when sex is paid for. The unconscious always responds to signals. The study also revealed something disturbing. The men who tried hardest to please were the ones who generated the least desire. The more effort they put into being nice, talkative, complimentary, the less impact they had. And that confirms one of the hardest truths a man can face. Female desire does not reward emotional servitude. It rewards perceived wholeness. One testimony said everything. There are clients who treat me like a queen, but I struggle to stay interested. And there are others who barely speak, but they make me feel observed, emotionally naked, as if they can see my soul. That is not coincidence. That is psychology, responding to depth. And what works on prostitutes, women trained to detach from desire, works even more strongly on ordinary women, because if they, in an environment where desire should be fake, are still vulnerable to signals of masculine depth, imagine what happens in real relationships. This experiment makes one thing clear. Male value is not defined by context, it is projected from the core. You can have money, you can have looks, but if your energy communicates a fragmented ego, it is felt. And if your energy communicates silent integration, that is felt too. This is not about manipulation, it is about understanding. Understanding how certain postures, gestures, attitudes activate in the female mind a response she cannot explain. Because when a woman says, "There's something about him, I don't know what it is, but I'm drawn to him," she is talking about this. Jung did not write about dating. He did not talk about pickup lines. He wrote about the soul, about the shadow, about the mysteries of the mind. But when his principles are applied to desire, they become a revelation, because Jung understood something most men still don't. Influence is not what you do. Influence is what you are. In his works on the shadow, he implied that we cannot deceive others about who we truly are because our unconscious broadcasts it constantly. This does not mean cruelty. It means internal alignment. It means being perceived as someone who does not collapse under the weight of the world. And in the female mind, that translates into desire. A woman may love the man she pities, but she only desires the man she respects. And respect is not born from compliments, not from excessive softness. It is born from contained energy, from self-knowledge, from the conviction of a man who walks through the world without asking permission to be himself. Jung observed that the most magnetic individuals were not the nicest ones, they were the most whole, the ones who had integrated their darkness, the ones who kept their center even in chaos. And is that not the most magnetic quality a man can possess?
In the realm of desire, this is law. A woman reacts to how you react to your own unconscious. If she perceives you as easily shaken, if everything she says or does controls your emotional state, if your inner stability depends on her approval, it doesn't matter how handsome you are, you lose value. Jung would say, the most effective personality is the one that does not need to be demonstrated, the one that is present, the one that radiates without explanation. And that is exactly what happens with men who trigger desire without speaking. Their presence alone is already a statement. Now ask yourself, why does this Jungian vision connect so deeply with female desire? Because attraction is not a surface emotion, it is an evolutionary response to internal coherence. A woman does not logically search for a strong man. Her intuition detects it in milliseconds. She feels it in your posture, in your voice, in your rhythm. And that feeling is not manufactured with lines or techniques. It is built through the process of individuation.
Jung would explain it like this: who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Translated into desire, a woman does not need to know you deeply to decide if she desires you. She only needs to perceive something she cannot explain: awareness, energy, depth. And that perception is not created by your clothes, not by your money. It is created by your internal state. Here is where most men fail. They try to build attraction through logic, through emotional explanations, through people-pleasing. But female desire is not born in the rational mind. It is born in the body, in the ancient brain. And that system does not respond to arguments. It responds to archetypes. That is why if Jung were alive today, he would not write dating books. He would write manuals on integration, on body language, on psychic positioning. Because for him, what mattered most was not being good, but being real. Not through deception, but through authenticity. This is not about manipulation. It is about understanding how human perception works. Because even if you are an honest man, hardworking, generous, if you do not project energy, direction, and shadow integration, her body will not register you as desirable. She may see you as safe, as reliable, but not as magnetic. Here is another key Jungian principle. The unconscious is compensatory. People lean more toward the one who is grounded than the one who is floating. Applied to desire, the more you plead, the less you provoke. The more you try to please, the deeper you sink into the nice guy persona. The more you depend on her attention, the less attention you deserve. Jung also suggested that what we do not face in ourselves, we meet as fate. Uncomfortable, but true. Female desire collapses when she perceives that she can dominate you emotionally, that your stability depends on her. And in that moment, without realizing it, you stop being a challenge and become a psychological projection of her own needs. Do you see it? Everything Jung taught about the psyche applies to desire, because desire is a game of depth, of polarity, of silent energy. And if you don't know how to play it, you end up competing with good boy gestures while she feels drawn to the man who isn't trying to impress her. The integrated man is not cruel. He is not abusive. He is the man who does not need validation to act. He inspires respect without forcing it. He walks with a level of conviction that makes her follow, even if she doesn't know why. And in the world of desire, that is an advantage few understand and almost no one masters. Before you say your first word, you have already been evaluated. Not by what you think, not by what you plan to say, but by something older, more brutal, more honest, your nonverbal language. A woman's unconscious, just like yours, has evolved for thousands of years to interpret symbols. It does not need logic. It does not need explanation. It only needs to observe. And in milliseconds, it decides whether you are a high-value man or a man who can be ignored. That judgment happens before you open your mouth.
And here is the terrifying part. You do not fully control it, because your body does not communicate what you want, it communicates what you believe. That is the law of the hidden language of desire. Jung would understand this perfectly, because for him, the body was the visible aspect of the soul. This is not about being handsome, it's about what your body communicates in silence. Slouched posture, fast, nervous movements, avoiding eye contact, speaking too quickly, taking up little space, uncontrolled gestures, laughing too much. All of this screams fragmentation. You can say intelligent things, you can try to sound confident, but if your body is saying something else, she will know and she will feel it.
On the other side, upright posture, slow breathing, eye contact without anxiety, controlled use of space, economy of movement, comfortable silence. These communicate something that cannot be faked for long: internal wholeness. Female desire reacts to these signals not because they are trendy, but because ancestral biology reads them as signs of genetic fitness, emotional stability, capability. In other words, you are not seducing, you are being examined without knowing it. And the most brutal part, she is not choosing it consciously. Her body reacts before her mind processes. That is why some men generate intrigue without saying a word, and others, even after trying everything, generate nothing. A study from the University of Texas revealed that women could detect testosterone levels in men through body odor alone, even without direct contact. Another experiment in the United States showed that over 90% of first impression impact in an interaction is determined by nonverbal communication. And do you know what that means? Most men are losing the game of desire without knowing they are even playing. They try to convince with words, with gifts, with compliments, when their body has already revealed a deeper truth. They are acting from a void. This part is crucial. You cannot control body language. If your internal structure is not aligned, you can practice smiling less, speaking slower, holding eye contact. But if inside you feel inferior, your body will always betray you. And this is not a curse, it is an invitation, because body language is not a technique to fake value. It is a mirror of your inner state. And when you fix the inner state, the body changes automatically. Jung said it plainly: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. But he was not talking about abstract spirituality. He was talking about the art of existing without justifying yourself. The energy you project before you speak can turn you into a stimulus or an invisible zero. A woman does not need to understand what you feel. She only needs to feel something when you are near. And that feeling is created with tension, presence, pauses, the ability to hold a gaze without rushing, without discomfort, without collapsing. Many men fail here because they confuse body language with acting. They practice poses, they rehearse lines, they imitate behaviors, but the body cannot hold a mask for long. Tension exposes it. Fake language collapses because what matters is not what you do, it is from where you do it, and that from where is everything. If your energy is born from fear of not being liked, your body screams it. If your energy is born from the certainty that you are valuable with or without her, that is felt too. Imagine two men entering the same room. One walks in seeking attention, looking around, smiling to please, the persona. The other walks in calm, unhurried, not looking for anything, the self. Which one do you think awakens more desire? Here is the paradox. The more you try to create attraction through effort, the less value you project. Because attraction is not a reaction to your intention, it is a reaction to your energy, to your center. And if you have no center, if your body is saying, "Please choose me," then it doesn't matter how much you talk, you've already lost.
That's why the hidden language of desire is not learned, it is cultivated. It is built from structure, from what you carry in silence, because what you say can be ignored, but what you project cannot be hidden. When a woman begins to perceive that a man has lost value, her body reacts before her mind. She doesn't make a rational decision. She doesn't write a list of pros and cons. She simply starts to disconnect. And at first, it's subtle, almost invisible. But if you know how to read the signs, you'll see it. She no longer responds with the same energy. Her messages get shorter, colder. Her attention becomes scattered. Her interest falls like a candle running out of oxygen. This does not mean she hates you. It doesn't even mean she met someone else. It means something more basic, more animal. She no longer perceives you as a high-value stimulus. And here is the most brutal part. She doesn't fully know why. If you ask her, she might say, "I don't feel the same anymore. I need space. Something changed." But she cannot explain the code her unconscious just decoded. That code does not respond to what you did yesterday. It responds to what you have been broadcasting unconsciously. Small attitudes, micro-gestures, neediness disguised as kindness, lack of emotional leadership, poorly managed anxiety. And when all of that accumulates, her intuition activates the alarm. He's not whole anymore. Female reaction to low value is not hatred, it is silent withdrawal. Because desire doesn't shut off with screaming, it cools down with indifference. Jung would say, what you resist persists, but in relationships, what you cling to escapes. And that is exactly what a woman does when she perceives you as weak. She shuts down. She doesn't attack you, she simply stops responding. At that moment, most men panic. They want to fix it. They try harder. They become more present, more available, more insistent. But what they don't understand is that every desperate gesture confirms their loss of value. She is not testing your patience. She is reacting to your energy. And if your reaction is anxiety, neediness, drama, you only reinforce what her body already decided. You are not the man she thought you were. This is where thousands of men collapse. They interpret silence as a communication problem, but it isn't. It is a perception problem. Because in the world of desire, perception is everything. When a man projects low value, a woman does not feel the urge to fight for the connection. She doesn't feel fire. She doesn't feel tension. She doesn't feel the pull. And her brutally honest body begins to withdraw emotional investment. First attention, then interest, then intimacy, and finally respect. And when a man loses respect, desire is already dead. Here is another uncomfortable truth. A woman can love you without desiring you. She can care about you. She can even respect you as a person. But if she no longer perceives you as a biologically valuable man, she will not feel fire. She will not feel deep connection. She will not feel genuine attraction. And this destroys the male ego. Because you ask, how can she disconnect if I was there, if I treated her well, if I was loyal, if I gave everything? Here is the answer. Desire does not respond to emotional effort. It responds to signals. And if those signals communicate dependence, lack of leadership, constant need for validation, her instincts stop seeing you as a partner and start seeing you as a child.
Jung would summarize it like this. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But if you depend on the love of another to know who you are, you will not last. Translated to female desire, if you depend on her choosing you, you lose power because you no longer act from your center, you act from fear. And a woman biologically cannot desire a man she perceives as psychologically smaller than herself.
She may pity him, she may stay longer out of habit, out of guilt, but desire, that internal fire, is gone. And you will not bring it back with gifts, not with long texts, not with explanations, because desire does not listen to arguments, it only responds to energy. The saddest part is that many men, instead of retreating with dignity, insist until they become invisible, and that destroys them. Because when she no longer desires you, and you stay begging for her attention, you are burying your own value in front of her eyes. The real answer is silence, not empty silence, but silence with center, silence with structure. Becoming a man who does not need to be chosen because he has already chosen himself. Only from that place can you recover power. Only from that place can her body ever see you as an option again. Because desire is not born from kindness, it is born from respect, and respect is born from wholeness, not power over her, but power over yourself. Recovering value in the eyes of a woman who stopped desiring you is not a mission for the weak. It is not a strategy to get her love back. It is a silent war to reclaim something far more important, yourself. Because what you truly lost was not her. What you lost was the perception of strength you once projected. And that, as painful as it is, can be rebuilt, but never from begging, only from internal reconstruction. Most men want to be desired again without transforming. They hope she changes her mind out of nostalgia, but attraction does not work that way. Female desire does not revive through memories, it revives through new perceptions, and those perceptions are not created with speeches, not with promises. They are created with silent facts, with real presence, with a change so deep you don't even need to announce it, because when change is real, it is visible without words. Jung would have said, transformation does not happen by staying in the comfort of the known. It happens by facing the unknown in yourself. And in love, that superiority is not over her, it is over your old self. Here is the key. Do not try to make her see you the way she once did. Become a man she has never seen before. Because what she needs is not to remember who you were. She needs to discover a man who today is impossible to ignore. And for that, you must first cut the reaction cycle. Stop looking for her. Stop justifying yourself. Stop acting as if her validation were oxygen. Because as long as she feels you are orbiting her attention, her desire for you will remain dead. Silence here is not indifference, it is alchemy. And that silence must be full, not empty, full of action, full of discipline, full of forward movement, because silent stagnation is just waiting, but silent evolution is power incubating. Rebuilding value begins when you become a man who does not need to be loved to feel valuable, because true attraction is not born from the desire to be accepted, it is born from certainty in your own individuation.
What does that transformation look like? It starts with the physical, a strong body, upright posture, high vital energy, not for aesthetics, but because the body is the vessel of the soul. A weak body communicates vulnerability, a solid body communicates capacity. Then the emotional, cutting emotional dependency, stopping reaction to highs and lows, not chasing, not begging, learning to hold uncertainty without collapsing. That is pure magnetism. And then the psychological, having a purpose bigger than her, an internal mission that does not move based on external approval. When a man has direction, he automatically projects value, because masculine energy is not defined by what it conquers, but by what it sustains. The most common mistake, thinking improvement is a strategy to get her back. No, improvement is a strategy to never again become the man who loses himself. If she returns, she should not find the same you waiting with open arms. She should collide with an energy that does not need her attention, but attracts her like a magnet. Not through manipulation, but through authentic transformation. And if she never returns, it doesn't matter, because rebuilding value was never for her, it was always for you.
so that you never again kneel emotionally before anyone, so that you never again become the man who collapses when he is not chosen. Jung would explain it like this: I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. In the game of desire, that means this: you don't need to be loved first, you need to be perceived as whole. And being whole does not mean being cold, it means having an internal structure so solid that no rejection can make you lose posture. There is something deeply attractive about a man who does not become unstable, someone who does not shatter even when it hurts, who feels but does not collapse, who acknowledges rejection but does not turn it into trauma. He turns it into fire. Fire that transforms, fire that pushes, fire that elevates. Because when a man rebuilds his value through pain, he does not return as the same man. He returns as someone who does not need to return. And that is irresistible. You do not need to show anyone your evolution. You only need to sustain it. Because consistent presence, visible progress, and strategic detachment create an energy no woman can ignore. And if one day she comes back, you will not receive her with anxiety. You will receive her with calm, because you are no longer waiting, you are choosing. And if she does not meet your new standard, then she is no longer an option.
That is the real comeback. Not the man who seeks approval, but the man who no longer needs it. The man who does not ask for attention, the man who became the source of his own value. True power is not in what you say, it is in what you project without speaking. And that is what men who awaken genuine desire have learned to master. This is not about learning techniques, not lines, not psychological games. It is about becoming someone who emits value without explanation. Because the most powerful signals are not visible, they are felt. Your body language, your energy, your silence, your decisions, everything communicates something. And a woman, even if she cannot put it into words, picks it up in milliseconds. She is not searching for logic, she is searching for presence. A presence that makes her feel she is standing in front of a man who does not depend on her approval, who does not need to beg, convince, or compete. A man who is desired because he chose himself first. That is not achieved by pretending, it is achieved by building. And that construction happens every day in what you do when nobody is watching, in how you talk to yourself, in how you face rejection, in how you hold your center even when the world shakes. Desire is not born from perfection, it is born from congruence, from a man who does not need to hide his wounds because he has already transformed them into power. From a man who can approach without fear because he is not waiting to be saved by her attention. Jung would have said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Applied to desire, that means this: if you learn to control what you project, you will never again have to beg for what you deserve. And here is the conclusion. You don't need more tricks, you need more presence, more direction, more internal fire. Because desire is not requested, it is provoked. And respect is not begged for, it is imposed, without violence, through energy. If you learned something from this video, do not forget it. What you emit without speaking determines whether you are desired or ignored. Subscribe if you want to learn more hidden codes of desire and the psyche. Share this video if you know someone who needs to wake up. And remember, you don't have to be perfect, you only have to be impossible to ignore.